chickened out in coming, but it sort of goes like this. In 1862, Darwin, Charles, found an orchid in Madagascar. Well, it was sent to him, actually. That was a very large orchid, and he postulated in 1862 that there must be a pollinator with a 12-inch tongue. And of course, the natural world, being what it is, was entirely skeptical about that. And he said it was going to be a hawk's moth. And 132 years later, this is what happened. So I'm actually a big Wallace guy. I'm not a big Darwin guy. I just got back from the Galapagos, and quite frankly, everything's named after Darwin, you know, or the Galapagos. But he got this one right, and I was quite impressed. And this has absolutely nothing to do with the talk, other than the fact that I don't have a tongue that long, but mine's just as sharp. So stay tuned. Yeah. All right. So we got a quorum, do you think?
Yeah, go for it.
You reckon? That's what we should do.
You don't feed on people here anyway.
Alright, so if this thing boots up, and half the topic today is on corruption, and this PowerPoint presentation is corrupt as well, so that just works fine for me. Let's just see if we can find out what we're doing here. I'm going to need that extra time, I think.
Your glasses are on your forehead.
Yeah, I know. I don't need glasses. I need glasses. Hang on, let's try this.
But his hair can see well.
Please work. Please work.
Join the gang.
Yeah, there's big of them.
Please don't grab up.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Found them in Africa. Nice. Almost a full trash.
Cool. They must do look up to water.
Yeah, I think it's standing. They grow.
Yeah, sure.
Showtime. Well, I'd like to welcome you all here, all of you. I didn't expect all of you, but I'm glad you're all here. I'd like to begin by thanking the Nanaimo North Library for continuing to host this, although I think in the future we're going to have to charge them more. I'd like to thank my subatomic particle physicist Murray Welty and my Amy Guru for coming to the rescue yet again in my sort of Luddite ineptitude. And I'd like to thank a bunch of other people, but that will come with time. So, if you punch in Madagascar to Google in the West, you will get this.
I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it.
No. So I invite you to just sit back for about a minute. I'm going to crank this one up a little bit. Or not. And enjoy this.
Cool.
Well, let's come back to that. Cannabis has obviously been legal for far too long at DreamWorks because there are no lions in Madagascar. There are no giraffes in Madagascar. There are no hippos in Madagascar. There are no zebras in Madagascar. There are no lorises in Madagascar, and there sure as hell ain't no penguins. There are eyes, which is this little creature there, thought to be extinct in 1933, rediscovered in 1951. And there are ring-tailed lemurs. But there are no king ring-tailed lemurs because lemurs are matriarchal. In fact, the monarchy of Madagascar was matriarchal. So there was no King Julian at all. Not only that, but there are 22 million people in Madagascar, a fact that the DreamWorks people seem to conveniently elude themselves when they made this movie, which could have been equally named Maldives. So this is not the real McCoy. The reason there are no lions, and the reason there are no hippos, and the reason there's no zebras in Madagascar is because of continental shift and drift. And I don't know if you all remember Pangea, but this is Pangea.
What do you remember?
What do you remember about Pangea? So way back here at 120 million years ago, you can see that Madagascar was more aligned physically with India than it was with Africa. And if you follow the course of what's happened since then, Madagascar has evolved totally separate from the rest of the world. In fact, 90% of their species, 90% of the biodiversity exists nowhere else on Earth, which was one of the reasons why I wanted to go there. The reason there's no lemurs in Africa is because of monkeys. And with all due respect to the Non-Animal Bulletin, they had monkey business sort of on the top of it. It's not monkey business. The monkeys killed all the lemurs in Africa. And the reason that there are lemurs in Madagascar is because there were no monkeys in Madagascar. So that's how the animals got there. How the people got there was basically in two migrations. About 3,000 years ago from southern Borneo, there were ships like this, similar to the Polynesian ships that cruised the Pacific, that landed on the northern tip of Madagascar. And about 1,500 years later, the southern Bantus came across. Now the Malays brought rice, and the Bantus brought cattle, zebu. So that's the origin of their cuisine. If you ask an average Malagasy if he considers himself an African, he will take your head off. He considers himself a Malay.
Oh.
It gets kind of difficult when you have, there are 14 tribes, and 2 of them are pretty African. There's the Sakalava and the Bara. But they also consider themselves Malay rather than African. So how did we get to Madagascar? Well, we didn't go on a sailing ship. We flew. Didn't take us 6.5 days from Paris. It took us 9 hours. It was quite an ordeal, and we woke up with this view. And it looks beautiful, doesn't it? Until you consider the fact that all the heating and cooking comes from charcoal. There's virtually no electricity, and where it exists infrequently. The average person living in those houses eats rice 363 days a year and may have meat 2 days a year. And it's a hotbed of all kinds of criminal activity. But it is beautiful, I will grant you that. And the view from, this view actually was from the place we stayed at, which was one of the Queen's palaces for her musicians, turned into a boutique hotel. So, what's a bandit? Well, a bandit is a person who takes by force from A what A has taken by guile from B. And when I first got to Madagascar, I had no idea of corruption and banditry. I didn't even think about that. I was going for the lemurs, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But once I got to Madagascar, I found there were a few kinds of corruptions and a few kinds of banditry that went on. And I won't have time to go into all of these, but all of these are in the book. And the Malagasy have a joke about themselves. They say, well, on the island of Nosy Bay, there was an old man walking down the beach. And he looked down at the sand and he found an oil lamp that was sort of half out of the dirt. So he pulled it out and he began to rub it, and what do you know, poof, out comes a genie. And the genie says to the man, he says, I will grant you one wish. This is Madagascar. And the man said, well, you know, it's simple, I just want to live forever. And the genie said, I'm really sorry, but I'm not empowered to grant those kinds of wishes. Do you have another wish? And the man said, well, I'd like to live long enough until there's no more corruption in Madagascar. And the genie said, sneaky bastard. So that's an example of Malagasy humor. So the first bandits were actually the royalty that were the Marina tribe. And this is a fellow by the name of Andrew Minapurio Marina, because their names are that long. The first who actually unified the country, except for parts of the Bara tribes and the Sakalava, and created an empire. And he had his palace with mixtures of Norwegian and French influence at a place called Ambohemanga, just north of the capital. And you see the Zebu worship, the cattle worship that went on there. On our wall the first night was a charcoal drawing of this lady who, I didn't know at first, but her name is Rana Levana, the third. She was the third queen and the last ruling monarch of Madagascar, because when the French came in 1896, they exiled her to Algiers, and she died at the age of 55 of an embolism, and she was buried there, exhumed and brought back to Madagascar. When the castle, when the Rova, the architecture of the royalty of Madagascar. So when we left that building, we walked down, this is how the French depicted her, as the French depicted most monarchs who they sent to Algeria in exile. When we went down the street from this place at the top of the hill, we found this place. Burnt out, just a shell, which was Queen Rana Levana's, the first's palace. At the time it was built with French slavery, because that's what Rana Levana the first did. It was the largest wooden building in the world. She was a piece of work herself. When she took power, she was on the throne before her husband's retainers realized that she was going to take power, and she had them all killed. And she eventually had half the population of the country, which was 5 million people at the time, killed by various and nasty means. She had pikes with English and French heads around that palace, she reimposed slavery, so she was a darling of sorts. What she would do, one of the things she would do, is she killed all the Christians after allowing Christianity into the country, and she would take them to the edge of where the Rova was, and she'd dangle them off the cliff, and then she'd drop them, and then she'd pull them up, and with the understanding that they would be saved, and then she'd cut the ropes. So that was Queen Rana Levana the first. She had a particularly nasty ordeal called the Tangena ordeal. Now Tangena is a tree, member of the oleander family, which has a very potent cardiac glycoside as a poison inside it. And it's like almost like digoxin, but about 20 times more powerful. And her ordeal consisted of feeding you 3 pieces of chicken fat and a Tangena nut, and waiting. And if you successfully vomited up the 3 pieces of chicken fat, you were innocent of the crime which you were accused of committing. If you subsequently died from the poison, well, that was just the way things were. But if you didn't vomit up 3 pieces, and you didn't die, she made sure you did die because you were cleared a liar. And it was a different time, you know. So she had gates around the city and around Ambohemanga, and she had these huge stones which took 20 men to wheel into position every night so that the place couldn't be invaded. And as you can see, it only takes one Kiwi girl, one hand to push them back. But so they're all over the place. When I went to Madagascar, I wanted to see all the biodiversity that I could in all the geographic climatic regions that I could. So there's the north, the high plateau, which we landed in, the east, the west, the southern rainforest, and the southern dry forest. So we went east, west, southwest, and then we flew to the north. So this is the trail in red of the eastern route. One of the places we wanted to visit was a reptile farm called Paireiras. And it has the most amazing collection of chameleons and snakes and geckos and lizards, all kinds and descriptions. Magnificent place. The Malagasy have an expression like the chameleon, one eye on the future and one eye on the past. That's a gecko, that's not a chameleon, just for those of you interested. But there are bandits, okay? There are bandits who are very wealthy. And the one in the middle of this schematic is this fellow on the left upper corner. His name is Anson Wong. He's from Malaysia, and he's a multi-billionaire from all of the smuggling he's done in conjunction with FedEx to ship various reptiles around the world. His specialty was the very rare golden plowshare tortoise that you see next to that. And what he did is he actually invaded a reserve dedicated by the Malagasy for the protection of these animals in the southwest, stole 55 of them, and made 6 million pounds, British pounds, from that theft alone. The guy on the bottom right is named Tommy Critchfield. He's from Florida. He's been in jail as well. His specialty is breeding, and what he does is he steals reptiles from around the world, and he inbreeds them so that he only gets albinism from the results, and he sells the white offspring for huge sums of money to collectors. In April of this year, if you see this double-storied house here, there was a raid because the citizens of Toliara couldn't stand the smell anymore. They found 10,000 reticulated tortoises in this house, in every part of the house. And they were due to get somewhere in the order of $600 million, okay, from the illegal export of this. So this still goes on. And that's just one example of the kind of banditry that we encounter. On the roads, people sell ducks, but they also sell animals called tenrics, which are endangered marsupials, and that's for your cooking pot as well. It's a beautiful place. Now we're going down towards the ocean, and you have to stop for lunch. And if you stop for lunch on the road in Madagascar, you get to go to something called a hoteli. And hotelis, you have a choice of rice and some other animal. Because instead of the animal, you get the animal's bones. So you can have rice and fish bones, or rice and duck bones, or anyway, that was that story. The roads are eviscerating. They are just unbelievable. I've never seen roads like this in my life, and I've been a few places. There are roads that run out in the middle of nowhere. So anyway, we finally got down. Oh, the roads, by the way, are maintained not by the government, because the minister, for some reason, steals all the money that's supposed to go to the roads. It's the young orphans that maintain the roads and fill the potholes, and then try and stop trucks for a couple of cents for their labor. There's no there's no security net in Madagascar. There are thieves that siphon off the petrol trucks, petrol as they come up from Tomasina on the east coast, and there's a huge residua of French colonial attitude. There were two elderly women, French women, colonists that ran into the back of us. Just I thought we were done, but then a bush taxi ran into the back of them, so I thought they were done. Anyway, when I tried to see if they were okay, they said, "Nous parlons français seulement ici." We speak only French here, and that was the end of it. They went to the next town to complain about my driver, who had a favor owing from the police chief, and I don't think they made out very well. But the French in Madagascar are sort of like the French who were in Algeria. Some of them haven't really grown out of the spirit of colonialism. This is what the French also did on the east coast. They built a canal called the Pangalanas Canal, which is 160 kilometers long, if you can imagine how much work that took, so that they wouldn't have to use the Indian Ocean and get tossed all over the place. We went down it for 60 kilometers. It was an experience. It was joyous. It was wonderful. Because I didn't know about this place, but the guy I was dealing with did. It was called Le Palmarin. And there was a French guy who's collected all the lemurs in Madagascar, so they no longer get eaten or killed for any other reasons. And he's brought them to this one place. And there are reptiles, and there are all kinds of interesting flora. And there's villages nearby that come and perform for you in the evening. But it was the lemurs I had come to see, and I'll just give you a little history of that. You remember Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Well, he got a death sentence, medical death sentence, and he and Mark Cowarding went and they put pins in a world map to see where the most endangered species were. And then they went and they did a series on all of these creatures, and they published a book called Last Chance to See. And David Fry did it again with Mark Cowarding about 10 years later. So they came to Madagascar to see an ancient lemur called the Ai. So when I got my diagnosis, for those of you that don't know, I'm supposed to be dead 2 years now, but for some reason they just haven't come and picked me up. I decided that instead of seeing all of the various endangered animals, I would concentrate on my cousins. So I was going to do primates. So a couple of years ago I went to Uganda, mountain gorillas. Last year went to Borneo, did the orangutans. And we obviously had to do the lemurs. It says better to die tomorrow than today. Agreed. So this place was unbelievable. There were black and white sificas in the trees. There were these common brown lemurs that wouldn't get off your head. I mean, it's really funny. The first time I saw one, I said, "Oh, isn't that cute?" And he flew at me and landed on my head. And then there's red lemurs, and then there's brown and white sificas, and this one's called the crown lemur for obvious reasons. But the lemur that captured our hearts was this guy.
Well, hi. Hi, how are you? I'm here now. Where's your bananas? Isn't he beautiful? Hey, don't wait and call you. We were going to call you. We were looking for the other guy.
Kaçırdı.
This is the injury. He's about this big, and he's big. And they came at us from all at once, and I thought, ooh. And they have a magnificent cry. It goes right down his spine. They call him Bakobo, which is the father of man. And there are all kinds of legends about how they preceded humans. Magnificent beasts. Endangered. Magnificent. But there was one more lemur that I had to see, and that was the one that Douglas Adams had set out to see, and that was the Ai. And there are very few of them left. In fact, they have to be kept isolated from humans and other sort of predators. There's a predator called the Fusa there. So we went across to this island at night, and we waited.
Whoa.
And there's the Ai.
Whoa.
So Adams had something to say about him. He said, the Ai is a nocturnal lemur. It's a very strange looking creature that seems to have been assembled from bits of other animals. It looks a little like a large cat with bat's ears, a beaver's teeth, tail like a large ostrich feather, a middle finger like a long dead twig, and enormous eyes that seem to peer past you into a totally different world, which exists just over your left shoulder. When the Malagasy see these animals, they kill them on sight. Because it's thought, it's believed superstitiously, and they have a lot of superstitions called fadis, that if a lemur, or if this Ai looks at you directly in the eye, you will die. And so they don't have a lot of patience for them. But the Ai don't know any of this, and they wander into towns and they look at your shoes. And they do have a special finger. It's a really special finger. And what they can do with that finger is they can heat it up. Okay, because they have an exothermic mechanism to heat up the tip of the finger. They're the woodpeckers of the lemurs, and they'll gnaw at wood and they'll find grubs underneath there. And it's positively gross what they do with their fingers to get the grubs out, but that's how they survive. And time to talk about bandits again. So it's a common misconception that 90% of the surface area of Madagascar has been decimated and is gone. And that's not true, because the rainforest before human colonization looked like this map on the left. And it is true that more than 90% of that forest is now gone. But the rest of the country was savanna and dry forest. That on the right is a space shot, which is infrared, of where the fires are currently burning. So that's how bad that is. Now, this is a big headache. I explain it well in the book, but I'm not going to explain it well now because I just can't get my head around it. The length to which people go to extract rosewood trees, and these are the highly sought after trees in Madagascar, is incredible. They have all this stuff goes to China. The Chinese have black banks. They have it teeter-tottered with the price of vanilla because they've cornered the vanilla market. And they used to be that vanilla growers would bring vanilla when it was ready, when it was ripe. The Chinese imposed a date for which all vanilla had to be turned in. So in 2000 and 2004, there were two huge cyclones that devastated this northeastern part of the Sava region of Madagascar. And the government came up with a policy, totally corrupt, whereby any tree that was blown down in a cyclone you could sell, and there'd be no penalty because they're not protected. But the problem is that rosewood trees don't fall down in cyclones. They stay up. They're tough trees. So what these timber barons have done is they cut them down anyway and they bury them. I'll show you exactly what happens here. So they live in these forests. The average wage of a Malagasy is $2 a day. The average wage of a guy that goes and lives in the forest and cuts down trees, okay, is $2.50 a day. The people that float, these are called bola bola logs, these are 2-meter logs, down the river before the falls, they make $13 a day. And then they bury them in the sand or in pits. And the forest ranger from the national park gets $100 a week to not show up. And as the trucks drive through, the army guys get $13 a truck to let the trucks go through. So, I mean, it's totally corrupt. One of these containers, just give me a sec here, because I think this is worth giving you some stats on. Holds 20 tons of bola bola left over from the waste of 5,000 trees. One shipload of 160 containers represents 16,000 truck trips of 800,000 trees, or 320,000 tons of rosewood logs from 2.3 million rafting trips. This guy at the top right corner is probably, Hannah Arendt had a term called the banality of evil. He's probably the most banal, evil guy in the country. He's worth $66 million. He is the king of rosewood. They call him the roi de bois rose. And this is where it all goes to China. Okay? In 2012, China imported 757,000 cubic meters of rosewood, a 10-fold increase over the previous decade. Is it you?
Not me.
Oh. So there's 50 Chinese companies. This town of Xinyu did not exist before they started extracting rosewood from Madagascar. The 500 factories distribute to more than 1,500, sometimes there's interdiction, but not much. Hongmu, this is the furniture they make. Hongmu retail outlets in basically 4 Chinese cities. It would not have happened if in 1403 the first expedition from China to the west, manned by Xing He, didn't stop in Madagascar and bring home this wood which captivated the emperor's interest. So now every middle-class Chinese wants to have Hongmu furniture. But if you buy a bed made entirely of Hongmu or of rosewood, it's $1 million in today's money. So, next question, what do they eat? What do the Malagasy eat when they're in the forest cutting down these trees? And what do the Chinese eat in the small villages in the Chinese restaurants? They eat lemurs. They eat lemurs. Yeah, it's called bushmeat. And that's why they're virtually gone. So, I'm glad I sort of giving you a nice trip. We're back in Anantarego now. And now we're going to go west to see what we can find. So I wanted to go to a place called Morondava because just outside Morondava are the largest baobabs in the world. About 75 kilometers outside of the capital, there's a town called Bhinji, and its specialty is foie gras. So in one of the poorest countries in the world, you can buy a kilo of foie gras for $7. And I wrestled with my conscience. And then I bought a kilo of foie gras. There are some very wealthy people around Bhinji. Okay, some of them are very religious, as you can see. But every town has a specialty or else it doesn't survive. Some towns make raffia toys, some towns make wooden trucks, some towns make musical instruments. There's one town called Ambatolampy, great town. It makes aluminum cookware. And where do they get the aluminum, you might ask?
Oh, jeez.
Everybody has a cell phone in Madagascar because there are no landlines left. They've taken all the power lines, all the telephone lines, and they've made cookware. So, I mean, they're entrepreneurial, I'll give you that. So we went through these villages, magnificent villages, and there's a town in there called Miandravaza in the book. So anyway, we ended up at, there's eight species of baobabs in the world. This tree actually saved my life in Africa because it was the only source I could get of cream of tartar, which sort of kept me going for a little while I was hitchhiking. But there are 6 of these species are in Madagascar. One is in Australia and one is in Africa. So, yeah, it's a fantastic place. But the reason there's only baobabs is because all the other forest is gone. It used to be other forest, but that was easily dispensed with. They couldn't cut these down and they couldn't burn them out. So that's why they're alive. It's a great place. And iconic. So we get to Morondava, and I'm walking around town, and I'm thinking, there's a lot of shark's teeth just hanging on the walls here, and I'm not really sure why that's happening. And then somebody told me that in China, they love shark fin soup. So there's hardly any sharks left in Morondava. The other thing that was in Morondava was a mosque, which was interesting. So Muslims constitute about 7% of the population, 22 million people, but the Saudis, I guess it's safe to say now, have imported Wahhabism and imams into Madagascar, and they're now paying the local women to dress up in the hijab, and they're paying the young kids to come to school by feeding them lunch, and they're turning every place into a madrasa in the south and the southwest. They're going to build 2,000 mosques in the next 2 years. This is gold mining. Totally illegal, but nonetheless. That's a chameleon on my neck. Totally illegal, but nonetheless. So then we went to the southwest, okay, through the southern rainforest to the southern dry forest. This is a guy in Ansarabi, and I have to tell you about this. He makes things out of zebu horn, or cow horn. And his mask is an Air France nightshade. His engine is from a washing machine. His saws he makes out of tin cans and files them. And his buffing material is blue jeans. So, I mean, he's totally, self-employed, and he's doing well. I have an interest in wine. For those of you who don't know me, it's not a strong interest, but it's a very strong interest. And so I wanted to meet the winemakers of Madagascar. And I made arrangements to see a guy named Thierry Bernard. Thierry Bernard is from Bergerac in France, and he came out to Madagascar, and after working for a few people, he founded Suavita Vineyards. And he was making French varietals, as long as the termites didn't get his posts and everybody else didn't get his material. So we went to Thierry's house, and that's Thierry's house. But when we went to Thierry's house, the housekeeper said that he had fled to France. And then I looked up, and there were bullet holes all over the house because he'd been robbed, and he'd been extorted, and he's gone now. So, and I thought this was a really nice Malagasy proverb: all who live under the sky are woven together like one big mat. But if you have a winery, your mat's bigger than everybody else's, right? This is a lunchtime song and dance. I don't know where that came from. The architecture gets really funky as you go further south. And then we came across this scene. I don't know what to make of that. These are geraniums. And they were lugging these piles of geraniums up to the top of the hill. And they're fired up this humongous, it's a still, yeah, so it's a huge distillery. So I asked the guys what they made from this geranium distillate. And guess what they said?
Vodka.
The next time you put that stuff behind your ears, that's where it comes from.
Whoa.
That's where Chanel number 5 comes from. Okay. So now we're starting to get really remote. And we came to a national park called Ranamafana. The only reason it still exists is because of an American woman named Patricia Wright, who was trying to save the last golden bamboo lemurs. Okay, this is a giraffe weevil, by the way. And this, I took this photo, is the last golden bamboo lemur. There was a father and a son. The father died. That's it. There are no more. The reason that they had survived for as long as they did, despite the pressure on them, is because the bamboo they eat is so full of cyanide that nothing can get near them. But he'll be gone soon. So, and this is it's poignant. This Malagasy proverb: "Without the forest, there'll be no more water. Without water, there'll be no more rice." Because it's very true. This is a village in the park called Ranamafama. Go figure. And they have everything. This is a Malagasy traveler's palm. You can get water out of it. But all the charcoal is made from the forest. So that's not going to last long. Down the road, there's a national park called Isolo. Magnificent place with a bara. The bara are the outliers, right? They're the ones that rustle all the cattle, bury all their dead in the caves. But it has magnificent waterfalls, pools to swim in. It also has a huge encroachment from people that are searching for sapphires and other carborundum. So in the national parks, okay, there's Ilakaka, which did not exist 10 years ago. And this is one of the gem dealers that I dealt with in my own inimitable way in the book. So we're heading further south, and there's meat dealers. Now, the big bandits, the big rustlers in the south, rustle zebu. It used to be a rite of passage for a young boy who wanted to impress his father-in-law to, in the darkness of night, come into the enclosure, steal a calf or a cow, and then give it to him the next day as a memento of how industrious he was and how sneaky he was and how he was going to take care of the old man's daughter. But it's big business now, because now the cattle are stolen, and it's incredible what I found out about this. And they all end up on ships going to China. Okay. This man, Raymond Bila, he's killed somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 people in his quest for zebu. The Bara, the tribes people, the women had their hair like this because originally it was designed so that they wouldn't hear the sounds of gunshots of the authorities chasing, or the other villages chasing their men who were rustling their cattle. So there's a nice tradition. And this is what's happening now. I mean, this is really rampant. Only thin dogs become wild. They make rum. That's a still. There's a pipe that goes through the middle of it. And I tried it, but then I suddenly realized that it didn't throw away the foreshot. So it was probably mostly methanol. So it gets pretty primitive as you go further south. And the tombs get bigger. It's funny, as people get poorer, they're monuments to their dead. That is some crazy rituals when people die. They have something called fadeahi, which is called the turning of the bones. So they dig up the graves every 10 years and they dance with the bones. They dress them all up and they dance with them. Which is why every 10 years they have an outbreak of bubonic plague in various reasons, because that's where the plague lives. So anyway, the banditry has gotten so bad they're even disinterring skeletons for their calcium and turning them into tablets. That's how bad that's getting. So now we're down in Toliara and Ifati, and lo and behold, I didn't expect this, but the spiny forest there. was one of the most exquisite, bizarre places on the planet. I mean, there's trees and shrubs there that are just incredible. There's an entwined baobab. Now this little fellow down at the bottom here gave us a little tussle. He's a cricket, but he's not Jiminy Cricket. He's a poisonous cricket. And I went to pick him up, and the two little boys who were carrying us around, they were like, "Ooh, don't go near him." You know, so. And these are probably two of the last sportive lemurs in this park, in the world, that we managed to track that down. So, then we flew to the north, almost done. And the north was an old bandit hideaway. It was a pirate utopia, because that's where the pirates went when they got kicked out of the Caribbean. When Woodes Rogers became governor of the Bahamas, okay, he set down on these guys, and instead they heard about Aurangzeb and the Mogul ships that would go to Mecca every year. So all these guys went around the Cape, and guess what place was brilliant to have for water and for bringing up boats and redoing them? Madagascar. So it was probably the guy who wrote about Robinson Crusoe, Defoe, who wrote this as Captain Charles Johnson, the General History of the Robbers and Murders of the Pirates. But he describes pirates like Thomas Tew, pirates like Henry Avery, who made somewhere in the order of $600 million in one Mogul ship. And anybody know who this is? Captain Kidd. Okay, so this is Captain Kidd in New York. This is Captain Kidd throwing a barrel at his cook and killing him, which is the reason they tried Captain Kidd and the reason they hung him from a garrote in England. So all these pirates went to Madagascar on the first and second pirate rounds. And this is the pirate burial ground on Ile Saint-Marie. Rumor had it that there was a city called Libertalia, which a pirate named Mission started, a big city. And that city was supposed to be where Diego Suarez, the northernmost town, is today. In fact, in Diego Suarez, they have a festival every year called Libertalia Festival. So I believe the place existed. This is Jean. Jean's father is from Réunion. He's French, but he doesn't want anything to do with Jean because he was here on holiday when his mother had Jean. And Jean took us to a little town on the other side of Antin-Serana. In that time that he took us there and he came back, he got stopped by 4 police roadblocks and was extorted about $5 a pop each time. So that's 2 days' wages for Jean each time. So we made it up for him. Jean thought I was talking about Somali pirates, because they're now Somali pirates as well as the original pirates, but I wasn't. So we went to this magnificent little village where all these boats were sitting there doing nothing. And yet, they were hauling in nets with little needlefish and squid, and not much more they were bringing in. And the reason is because the boats don't go out anymore. And the boats don't go out anymore because the Chinese fishing fleet chase them every time they go outside the boundaries. In fact, they hire the fishermen, make them work on these boats for nothing. They sleep in cardboard boxes, and then they pay them in frozen fish when it's time to leave, if they can get off. So to learn who rolls over you, simply find out who you're not allowed to criticize. This is one of the more malevolent forms of banditry that goes on. In that village, there was sex tourism. Europeans fly in, and virginity is $20 if you've got $20. Anyway, we left that behind us. We went and we enjoyed the Zenizo Festival. Kids enjoyed it. And then we decided to go south to the 2 national parks in the north. I was anxious to see Ankarana, and I was anxious to see Montalban, because this was a village they were having a little market. So the roads were terrible. And we went to this place. This is Ankarana, and this is a crested kua. This is a national bird of Madagascar. This was in the room we rented. It's just a tiny little millipede that came out of the towel. I went, okay. So we gave him a pretty wide berth. And then we went to Montalban. Beautiful, beautiful National Park. That's my hand. Those are 3 of the smallest chameleons in the world. You just dig around the tree and then you can have a handful of them. Can you see the geckos there? There's one on each of those trunks.
Camouflage.
They're very well camouflaged. There's his eye. There's his mouth. There's his paws. Okay, so there's the first one. There's his head. There's his paw. See? So hard to find without a guide. And this is one of the last Sanford lemurs in the world. And he looks like he knows it's coming. So I asked our guide that we had in the north, I said, in both of these parks, I said, so how many lemurs are in this park? He said, we have 8 species. I said, okay. And I didn't pursue it. And then we went to the second park, and I said, now how many lemurs have you got in this park? And he said, we have 8 species. And I went, Eddie, how many lemurs have you got? He goes, 20. How many in the other park? 40. So in the northern part of northwest Madagascar, they have 60 lemurs left. Outwit, outplay, outlast. So I didn't want to give you the impression that everywhere we went, you know, we were suffering like the locals, because we weren't. I mean, we were fortunate, right? But when you got out of the pool, so I called the front desk and they sent a plumber, and faster than you get one here, and he arrived with his pipe wrench. And I thought, we're in business, right? And I said, and he looks at it and he goes, I'll come back tomorrow. I go, sure, because we're gone. So this is fairly poignant. The most common drink in Madagascar is ranavola, and they add boiling water to toasted rice, and they drink that stuff because it's sanitary, right? But it's also a perfect metaphor for what they've left to the Malagasy. Even the bottom finds something to hold. So we get to Nairobi on the way home, and I was on the floor. I was killing myself as I walked by this sign. It said, have you encountered any corruption? I'm kidding. Now, I forgot, this is supposed to be an author reading, right? So so I have to give you a little reading before everybody falls asleep. This house, sorry, just go to the house first. I didn't know who owned this house, who used to have this house. But as it turns out, it was Major General Gallieni, who invaded Madagascar in 1896 and destroyed everything and killed everybody. So that was a bit hard to get my head around afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to read you an excerpt. As you know, I don't read you anything terribly factual or terribly erudite, because I like to leave that in the book. I read you stuff that's lyrical in a situation like this, so you can read it and it won't tell you anything about the book. So this is about us forgetting the name of this place and going out for dinner. I had planned a special dinner that evening and had gone to great lengths to raise Robin's expectations of something sublime. This chef, Mariette Andrianjaka, is world-renowned, I had told her, and once served traditional banquets to Marina royalty and other notables. I booked a place from Canada. It's not far from here. We dressed and asked the young lady in the foyer to call for a taxi. Be careful, she said. It's dangerous after dark. It was after dark. Où allez-vous? Asked the cab driver. Chez Mariette, I said, and watched his eyebrows rise into the rearview mirror. D'accord, he said. You never know what she might be serving tonight, I said. It could be eel or carp or goose with all kinds of rice and vegetable dishes. As our driver went up most of the back streets of Favrovitra Hill, they began to narrow considerably, and it began to rain. There were no street lights, hardly any lights of any kind. He finally stopped to ask directions exactly where the famous chef was supposed to reside. The sentry at the entrance leaned over in his plastic raincoat. Mariette had decided not to cook tonight. Nice of her to let us know, I fumed. Our driver asked us where we wanted to go now. How should I know, I sputtered. I don't have a plan B. Robin asked me if I knew of any other nearby restaurants, and when I told her I didn't, she asked me why I didn't. And that's the way the rest of the evening was destined to unfold. Smash and grab robberies of vehicles stuck in hazardous nighttime traffic were the main courses on the menu of Bandit choices. I decided to throw myself on the merciful good judgment of a driver who had likely never eaten in a restaurant in his entire life. Connaissez-vous un bon endroit pour manger, monsieur? I asked. Do you know of a good place to eat? His eyebrows did that ascension thing again. Not so much like an act of rising to a higher level, but more like the arrival of Christ into heaven after his resurrection. He was so clearly flattered in my trust of his opinion that he took a full minute to compose his response. Hotel Pradi? He said, or asked, or equivocated. But I wanted him to feel confident in his choice of eateries as much as I wanted him to be correct. Robin was giving me that not-so-sure expression. Mais bien sûr, I asserted myself. Hotel Pradi. Pourquoi je n'ai pas pensé? Why didn't I think of that? Robin didn't appear totally convinced. He nearly put his clutch through the floorboards in his relief at our entente cordiale and roared off down several more narrow alleyways to the bottom of the hill. If you Google Hotel Pradi, not only will you not find a website, you won't find a Hotel Pradi. If you Google an English translation for Pradi, you will get only Pradi. From the appearance of the exterior we arrived at, this was completely understandable. Only an ailing neon sign confirmed that we had indeed reached our destination, Hotel Pradi. Our first clue should have been the empty parking lot, but it was raining and perhaps our vision was slightly impaired. Our second clue should have been the welcome. We were the only ones glad to see us. Everyone else was surprised and none too grateful for having to detach themselves from the black and white television flickering in the corner of the lobby. Even then, our taxi had departed and we were in no mood to consider our good fortune anything less than a miracle. But our third clue, and this is where I must admit the loss of all my otherwise keen powers of observation, should have been that the restaurant was deserted and as dark as the neighborhood we had just driven through. But this was now a pilgrimage, and the lights in the eating part of the Hotel Pradi were now tentatively switched on. I motioned to a man who I thought might have been a waiter, but serial killer might have been a more accurate job description. He brought menus and water. I touched the menu, but I wasn't about to walk on the water. I asked for beer. 3 horses, he asked. I assumed that was beer and not a main course, and nodded. The fourth clue should have been the gargantuan size of the bottle. Patrons came here to drink. Robin frowned and took refuge in her menu. What's safe? She asked. But it was already too late for that. I know, she said. What? I asked. What do they have everywhere in this country? She continued. Roaming in herds, pulling their carts, blocking the roads. Zebu? Exactly, she said. I'll have the Zebu medallions. Serial killer wrote down Zebu. I think I'll try a local dish, I said. Robin stared at the suggestion, but I was determined to rescue what little elegance I could from the circumstances I had created. Here it is, Eureka moment. The national dish of Madagascar, Romazava. What's that? She remained unconvinced. It's a meat stew with spinach and onions and garlic, I said. It comes with rice. What doesn't? She asked. Serial killer wrote down Romazava. We were on our 9th horse when the food arrived. Not for no reason was the tablecloth the color of bile. The bad news was that the Zebu was so tough that Robin couldn't get her fork into it. The good news was that they completely left any trace of meat out of my national dish. They could have at least given you some bones, she said. The French fries, like other gifts from the French, were greasy and cold. Robin and I rearranged the organic matter on our plates for long enough to realize it was time to bid adieu to the culinary excellence of the Hotel Pradi and return to the sanctuary of the French general who had so brutally mistreated their families. But here was a new problem. After 9 horses of big beer, neither Robin nor I could remember the name of the general, and consequently could provide the hotel staff with the name of our lodging. Serial killer logged onto the French keyboard in front of him and Googled the names of all the accommodation in his city of 1.3 million inhabitants. I racked my brain for the name but found nothing but helpless oblivion. We were just beginning to consider the opportunity of having to spend the night in the other part of the Hotel Pradi when our cab driver came through the front door to inquire as to how we had enjoyed the meal at the restaurant he had recommended. I might have hugged him, but he was drenched from the torrential rainstorm continuing outside, and he was only saving us from the monstrous plot he had concocted in the first place. Back at La Maison Gallieni, the young lady asked how we'd enjoyed Chez Mariette. We told her that Mariette had taken the night off. "But where did you eat?" she asked. "I plan on forgetting," Robin said, "unless he writes it down someday." Thank you very much. That's a good tune. We were also bandits in Madagascar, but you have to buy the book to realize how much. Which leads me to the really unpalatable part of this, and that is where you can get the Bandits of Madagascar. So, you can get them here. I don't have many, so you might have to wrestle each other if you want. You can get them online, and I have to warn you, because a friend recently told me of her experience. Don't go to Amazon.com, go to Amazon.ca, because it's cheaper.
Really?
A lot cheaper now.
That's weird.
Yeah. So there is a print book, there's ebook, and there's audiobooks. I like the audio. Just to show you one more thing, there are Bandits of Madagascar. For example, if you buy Bandits of Madagascar in New Zealand, Wheeler's, which is the largest retailer of books in New Zealand, will charge you $71.50 New Zealand, which is about $60. I don't get much of that, so we're going to have a chat in a few weeks. Right? If you go to Portland, Oregon, you can buy the audiobook for, where is it? $74.97 American. Don't do that. Go on to Amazon.ca. I have to tell you about the next project. Because the next project is going to hit really close to home. Because it's going to be a history of Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. And all the glory and all the characters who've impacted so favorably and unfavorably on my life. It'll be fun. It's good. It's just going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for this to be over so I can get stuck into it.
I actually was there.
All right, well, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. And, lights, please.
That was good.
So I guess I'm still over here.